Welcome to TrueCrime Unveiled Podcast. Dive deep into the mysteries that captivate us. If you appreciate this episode, please consider liking and subscribing to support us.
The summer of 1996. Atlanta, Georgia. The world's eyes were on the city, host to the Centennial Olympic Games. Excitement and global unity filled the air, a vibrant tapestry of cultures and competition. Beneath this veneer of celebration, however, a sinister plot was brewing. In the heart of Centennial Olympic Park, a bomb was ticking, set to shatter the festive atmosphere and etch a dark scar on the Games. It was a moment in time that would transform from jubilation to terror, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the lurking shadows of evil. This is the story of the Centennial Olympic Park bombing.
The date was July 27th, a Saturday night. Crowds had gathered in Centennial Olympic Park for a late-night concert. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of anticipation for the music and the lingering thrill of the games. Among the crowd was Richard Jewell, a security guard working for AT&T. Jewell, a man with aspirations of a career in law enforcement, was known for his diligence and strict adherence to rules. He spotted a suspicious unattended backpack under a bench near the sound tower. His observations, initially perceived as overzealous by some, would soon prove to be tragically accurate. He immediately alerted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and began evacuating the area.
Jewell's actions undoubtedly saved lives. The bomb, contained within a green Alice pack filled with nails and shrapnel, detonated at 1:20 a.m. The explosion ripped through the night, sending a shockwave through the park. The initial reports were chaotic. The blast resulted in 2 deaths: Alice Hawthorne, a mother attending the concert with her daughter, and Melih Uzunyoğlu, a Turkish cameraman who suffered a fatal heart attack while rushing to the scene. Over 100 others were injured, many suffering severe shrapnel wounds. The bomb, a pipe bomb packed with 3 galvanized pipes filled with explosives, was a crude but effective device designed to maximize casualties.
The immediate aftermath was a scene of unimaginable chaos. Injured concertgoers stumbled through the smoke and debris, desperate for help. First responders rushed to the scene, working tirelessly to triage the wounded and transport them to local hospitals. The festive atmosphere had been instantly replaced by the grim reality of a terrorist attack. The world watched in horror as news of the bombing spread, the Olympic dream shattered by an act of senseless violence. The focus immediately shifted from celebration to investigation. Who was responsible for this horrific act, and why would they target an event meant to symbolize global unity and peace? Less than person one greater than. Before the bomb ripped through Centennial Olympic Park, Atlanta was a city brimming with the electric energy of the Games. The park itself was a vibrant hub, a place where people from all walks of life converged to celebrate the spirit of competition and international unity. Street vendors hawked souvenirs, the air thick with the aroma of hot dogs and popcorn. Laughter and music filled the air, a constant soundtrack to the festivities. Families strolled along the pathways, children's faces painted with the flags of their nations. Imagine the scene: a warm summer evening, the sky just beginning to darken, the glow of the Olympic torch casting long shadows across the jubilant crowd. It was a scene of pure joy, a testament to the power of sport to unite, a moment that would be forever etched in the city's memory, but for all the wrong reasons.
Indeed, the park was intended as a safe haven, a place where visitors could relax and enjoy the Olympic atmosphere. Security was present, of course, but the mood was relaxed, not overtly vigilant. People felt safe. There was a sense of community, a shared experience that transcended national boundaries. Think of the countless interactions, the brief conversations struck up between strangers, the shared smiles over a sporting victory, the collective gasps during a nail-biting finish. This atmosphere of carefree camaraderie was shattered in an instant. The explosion transformed the park from a symbol of unity into a scene of chaos and terror. The very ground that moments before had vibrated with joy now trembled under the force of unimaginable violence.
The bomb, a pipe bomb packed with nails and screws, detonated at 1:20 a.m. directly in front of the AT&T Global Village, a 4-story sound and light tower showcasing sponsors, technology. The immediate aftermath was a scene of utter devastation. The blast sent shrapnel tearing through the crowd, leaving a trail of blood and debris. The joyous music was replaced by the piercing screams of the injured, and the frantic shouts of those trying to help. The colorful, festive atmosphere was instantly extinguished, replaced by the stark, horrifying reality of a terrorist attack.
One life was lost directly as a result of the bombing. Alice Hawthorne, a 44-year-old mother from Albany, Georgia, who was at the park with her daughter. Over 100 others were injured, some critically, their lives forever marked by the physical and emotional scars of that terrible night. A Turkish cameraman, Melih Uzunjol, suffered a fatal heart attack while running to the scene to cover the bombing. Beyond the immediate casualties, the bombing cast a long shadow over the Games, transforming a celebration of human achievement into a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present threat of violence. The reverberations of that explosion would be felt far beyond the confines of Centennial Olympic Park, impacting not only the lives of the victims, but also the course of the investigation that followed.
The Centennial Olympic Park in Atlanta, Georgia, on July 27, 1996. A festive atmosphere, the heart of the Games, buzzing with thousands of people celebrating. Music filled the air, laughter echoed, the thrill of international competition palpable. Families strolled, athletes mingled with fans, and amidst this joyful scene, a green backpack lay abandoned beneath a bench near the sound tower. It was a typical summer night, warm and vibrant. The park was a microcosm of global unity, a symbol of peace and athletic achievement. Security guard Richard Jewell, diligent in his duties, noticed the unattended bag and immediately alerted the authorities. His actions initiated a series of events that would irrevocably change the course of his life and cast a long shadow over the Olympic Games. It's hard to imagine, amidst such jubilation, that tragedy was about to unfold.
The initial reaction was textbook procedure. Law enforcement responded swiftly, the area was cordoned off, and a bomb squad was dispatched to investigate the suspicious package. The park, so recently a picture of carefree celebration, was now tinged with a sense of unease. The music faded, replaced by the urgent instructions of security personnel guiding people away from the sound tower. The shift in atmosphere was subtle at first, a ripple of concern spreading through the crowd. Then, as the minutes ticked by, the tension became palpable. The weight of the unknown hung heavy in the air, a silent dread that contrasted sharply with the earlier festive spirit. The scene was a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present possibility of disruption.
Jewell's vigilance was initially lauded. He was hailed as a hero for spotting the backpack and potentially saving lives. News outlets began reporting on his quick thinking and decisive action. He gave interviews, recounting the events leading up to the discovery. For a brief moment, he was the face of vigilance and courage. He was portrayed as the man who prevented a much larger catastrophe. However, this narrative was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. The bomb detonated at 1:20 a.m., killing 2 people and injuring over 100 others. The festive atmosphere was shattered, replaced by chaos, fear, and the horrific aftermath of the explosion. The joyous occasion turned into a scene of tragedy, forever etching itself into the memory of the world.
The blast ripped through the heart of the Olympic Park, transforming the scene of celebration into a scene of carnage. The sound of the explosion reverberated through the city, a stark contrast to the earlier cheers and music. The festive lights now illuminated a horrific tableau, debris scattered across the park, injured individuals seeking medical attention, and a palpable sense of shock and disbelief. The bomb, consisting of 3 pipes filled with nails and screws, had been designed to maximize damage and inflict the greatest possible harm. The idyllic image of the Olympic Games was irrevocably tarnished, replaced by the stark reality of violence and loss. The investigation began immediately, an urgent search for answers amidst the devastation.
Let's delve into the heart of the incident. The Centennial Olympic Park bombing. It was July 27, 1996, a Saturday. Amidst the electrifying atmosphere of the Atlanta Olympics, the park, a vibrant hub of activity, was teeming with thousands of people enjoying the festivities. Around 1:20 a.m., a 911 call reported a suspicious package found under a bench near the sound tower. The package, a green backpack, contained 3 pipe bombs packed with nails and screws, designed to inflict maximum damage in the crowded area. This was no amateur operation. The bomb was sophisticated and deadly. The initial response was swift, with security personnel, including Richard Jewell, who was working as a security guard, quickly moving to evacuate the area surrounding the suspicious package.
The evacuation was underway, but the bomb detonated before everyone could be cleared. The explosion ripped through the night, sending shrapnel flying through the air. The blast directly killed one person, Alice Hawthorne, and a Turkish cameraman, Melia Uzunyol, suffered a fatal heart attack while rushing to cover the scene. Over 100 others were injured, some critically, by the flying debris. The scene was chaotic and horrific. The sound of the explosion, the screams of the injured, the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. It was a scene of utter devastation, a stark contrast to the celebratory atmosphere that had filled the park just moments before. The bombing transformed the Olympic Games, a symbol of global unity and achievement, into a scene of tragedy and terror.
The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. First responders rushed to aid the injured, while law enforcement secured the area and began their investigation. The FBI took the lead, quickly classifying the incident as an act of domestic terrorism. The bomb's construction and placement indicated a deliberate attempt to cause mass casualties. The focus immediately shifted to finding the perpetrator. The pressure was immense, with the world watching and demanding answers. Who would commit such a heinous act, and what was their motive? These questions hung heavy in the air, as investigators began the painstaking process of piecing together the events leading up to the bombing and the evidence left behind.
Investigators immediately began collecting evidence from the blast site, meticulously combing through the debris for any clues. They also started interviewing witnesses, hoping to gather information about anyone who might have seen something suspicious in the hours leading up to the explosion. The initial focus was on identifying the individual who made the 911 call, hoping that they might have observed something crucial. Simultaneously, the FBI began exploring potential motives, from domestic extremist groups to individuals with personal grievances. The investigation was complex and multifaceted, requiring the coordination of numerous agencies and the analysis of vast amounts of information. The pressure to find the bomber was immense, fueled by the international attention and the desire to bring justice to the victims and their families.
The bomb detonated at approximately 1:20 a.m. on July 27, 1996. Right in the heart of Centennial Olympic Park. The park was bustling with people enjoying the festivities, completely unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. The immediate aftermath was chaos. Screams pierced the night air as people scrambled for safety, desperate to escape the carnage. The sound of sirens echoed through the streets as emergency personnel rushed to the scene, working tirelessly to triage the injured and search for survivors amidst the debris. The initial reports were fragmented, painting a picture of confusion and terror. One witness described seeing a flash of light followed by a deafening roar. Another recounted the chilling sight of bodies strewn across the ground. It was a scene of unimaginable devastation.
The explosion killed one person, Alice Hawthorne, and injured over 100 others. The shrapnel from the pipe bomb, packed with nails and screws, caused horrific injuries. The psychological impact on those present, and indeed on the nation watching the news unfold, was immense. The Olympic Games, meant to be a symbol of international unity and celebration, were suddenly overshadowed by an act of domestic terrorism. The festive atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a palpable sense of fear and uncertainty. People were afraid to gather in public spaces, constantly looking over their shoulders, wondering if and when another attack might occur. The bombing shattered the sense of security that had enveloped the Games.
Within just 3 days, Richard Jewell, the security guard who initially discovered the bomb and helped evacuate the area, was identified by the FBI as a person of interest. The media, fueled by leaks from law enforcement, quickly seized on this information and portrayed Jewell as the prime suspect. His face was plastered across newspapers and television screens nationwide. He was subjected to intense scrutiny and relentless media harassment, effectively undergoing a trial by media before any formal charges were filed. The public, desperate for answers and reassurance, readily accepted the narrative presented by the media. The shift from hero to villain was swift and brutal, a stark reminder of the dangers of premature judgment and the power of media influence.
The investigation into the bombing intensified, with law enforcement agencies working around the clock to gather evidence and piece together what happened. The FBI conducted hundreds of interviews, meticulously combing through the debris field for clues. The pressure to find the perpetrator was immense, not only to bring justice to the victims, but also to restore a sense of security to a nation on edge. The media frenzy surrounding Richard Jewell added another layer of complexity to the investigation. While the FBI was careful to publicly maintain that Jewell was only a person of interest, the relentless media attention made it incredibly difficult for investigators to pursue other leads without facing public pressure and scrutiny focused solely on Jewell. The atmosphere was charged with suspicion and fear.
Let's delve deeper into Richard Jewell's psychological profile. He presented himself as a law and order type, eager to impress authority figures and portray himself as a hero. He had a history of overzealousness in previous security roles, often exceeding his authority and acting like a wannabe law enforcement officer. This desire for recognition and validation seems to be a recurring theme. He craved the spotlight, and ironically, his actions at Centennial Olympic Park, initially perceived as heroic, did place him in the spotlight, albeit in a way he never anticipated. This inherent contradiction, the desire to be a hero juxtaposed with actions that eventually painted him as a suspect, is crucial to understanding the complexity of this case. We see a man striving for acceptance and recognition, yet ultimately caught in a web of suspicion largely due to his own behaviors and eagerness to please.
Exactly. And this eagerness to please, coupled with a somewhat naive personality, likely played a role in how he interacted with law enforcement during the initial investigation. He seemed almost too willing to cooperate, too eager to tell his story, which, unfortunately, fueled the suspicions of the investigators. They perceived his eagerness as a sign of guilt, a desperate attempt to control the narrative. He saw himself as assisting in the apprehension of the real perpetrator, completely unaware that he was becoming the prime suspect. This misinterpretation of his behavior by law enforcement underscores the dangers of relying solely on perceived personality traits in criminal investigations. The investigators, influenced by their preconceived notions and the pressure to quickly solve a high-profile case, seemed to fit Jewell into a narrative that suited their needs, overlooking crucial details that pointed elsewhere.
It's a classic example of confirmation bias. The investigators, influenced by the profile they had constructed, interpreted Jewell's actions and statements through that lens. They focused on aspects of his personality that seemed to fit the profile of a lone bomber. His desire for recognition, his fascination with law enforcement, and disregarded evidence that didn't fit their narrative. The media frenzy that ensued further complicated the situation, amplifying the public perception of Jewell as the perpetrator and solidifying the investigators' initial suspicions. The pressure to solve the case quickly, especially given the international attention on the Olympics, likely contributed to this rush to judgment.
The tragic irony is that Jewell's genuine desire to help, his ingrained need to be seen as a hero, ultimately became his downfall. The very traits that led him to alert authorities to the suspicious backpack and potentially save lives were the same traits that painted him as the prime suspect. This case serves as a stark reminder of the complexities of human behavior and the dangers of making assumptions based on superficial observations. It also highlights the immense power of the media and its ability to shape public opinion, often with devastating consequences. The rush to judgment not only tarnished Jewell's reputation, but also significantly hampered the investigation into the actual perpetrator, Eric Rudolph.
Let's delve into the investigative chaos that followed the bombing. The FBI, under immense pressure to find the perpetrator quickly, focused heavily on Richard Jewell. This focus, while understandable given the initial circumstances, arguably led to tunnel vision. They poured resources into building a case against Jewell, seemingly neglecting other potential leads. One such lead involved a mysterious 911 call made before the explosion, warning of a bomb planted in Centennial Olympic Park. While this call was initially considered crucial, it became somewhat sidelined as the investigation zeroed in on Jewell. The caller's voice, described as having a hillbilly accent, was never definitively identified, and the possibility of other individuals involved was never fully explored due to the fixation on Jewell. This represents a significant missed opportunity in the early stages of the investigation.
Adding to the complexity were the taunting communications received by authorities. A letter claiming responsibility for the bombing and signed by a group calling themselves the Army of God was sent to the FBI. This letter, while initially treated as a credible lead, was later dismissed as a hoax. The letter's language and tone suggested a specific ideological motivation, which ultimately didn't align with the emerging profile of Richard Jewell. There was also a phone call made to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, containing a cryptic message hinting at further attacks. These communications, while unsettling, ultimately served as distractions, muddying the waters and further diverting resources from other potential avenues of investigation. The question of whether these distractions were intentional, designed to mislead investigators, remains unanswered.
Amid the confusion and misdirection, there were moments of what seemed like genuine progress, which ultimately turned out to be false hope. The composite sketch of a potential suspect, based on eyewitness accounts of a man seen placing a suspicious backpack near the concert stage, was circulated. This sketch, while seemingly a promising development, yielded no tangible results. The description provided was too generic, and the sketch itself bore little resemblance to Richard Jewell. The fleeting hope that this sketch would lead to a break in the case quickly faded as the investigation remained stagnant. The public, desperate for answers, clung to each new development, only to be met with repeated disappointments. This cycle of hope and disappointment fueled public speculation and contributed to the media frenzy surrounding the case.
The reliance on Jewell's supposed profile as a failed law enforcement officer, eager for recognition, also played a role in the investigative missteps. This narrative, while appealing in its simplicity, lacked substantial evidence. Jewell's past employment history, although marked by some instances of overzealousness, did not point definitively towards a motive for such a violent act. The investigators, it seems, were influenced by this preconceived notion, leading them to interpret ambiguous evidence in a way that confirmed their existing biases. This predisposition towards confirming their initial suspicion arguably hindered a more objective and thorough investigation, diverting attention away from other credible leads and prolonging the search for the true perpetrator.
The Centennial Olympic Park bombing wasn't just about the physical devastation. It left an enduring scar on the emotional landscape of Atlanta. The victims, those injured, and those who lost their lives, faced immediate trauma, the kind that shatters your sense of safety and leaves you perpetually on edge. Alice Hawthorne, the mother of the only fatality, Melly Uzunyol, spoke about the gaping hole left in her life, the constant ache of absence. And for the injured, the physical wounds often healed faster than the emotional ones. Many reported struggling with PTSD, anxiety, and depression long after the physical scars faded. They had to relearn how to navigate daily life, constantly reminded of the fragility of existence.
Beyond the individual trauma, the bombing had a ripple effect across the entire community. Atlanta, a city brimming with pride for hosting the Olympics, suddenly found itself grappling with fear and uncertainty. The image of the vibrant park, transformed into a scene of chaos and tragedy, became etched in the collective memory. This wasn't just an attack on individuals. It felt like an attack on the city's spirit, its identity. The bombing eroded the sense of community and trust, leaving many feeling vulnerable and exposed. The heightened security measures that followed, while necessary, served as a constant reminder of the violence and further contributed to the atmosphere of unease.
The long-term psychological impact on the community is often overlooked in these types of cases. We tend to focus on the immediate aftermath, the investigation, the trial, but the trauma doesn't simply disappear. It lingers, shaping people's behaviors, their relationships, their perception of the world. Many Atlantans reported a lasting fear of crowds, of public spaces, even years after the bombing. The Olympics, meant to be a celebration of international unity and athletic achievement, became synonymous with tragedy and loss. The city's recovery, both physical and emotional, was a long and arduous process.
And then, of course, there's the specific trauma inflicted upon Richard Jewell. Initially hailed as a hero, he quickly became the prime suspect, subjected to intense media scrutiny and public condemnation. Imagine the emotional whiplash, the devastating shift from being lauded for saving lives to being vilified as a potential killer. Even after he was officially cleared, the suspicion and the whispers lingered. His reputation was tarnished, his life irrevocably altered. The FBI investigation, while ultimately exonerating him, took a significant toll on his mental and emotional well-being, adding another layer of complexity to the already tragic narrative of the Olympic Park bombing. The case serves as a stark reminder of the potential for devastating consequences when law enforcement prematurely focuses on a single suspect.
The relentless media scrutiny continued to mount an unbearable pressure on Richard Jewell. Every aspect of his life was dissected, analyzed, and broadcast to the world. His past employment history, his character, his personal belongings, all became fodder for public consumption. The initial portrayal of Jewell as a hero swiftly morphed into a narrative of suspicion, fueled by leaks from law enforcement sources. This constant barrage of negative publicity created a highly prejudicial environment, effectively convicting him in the court of public opinion before any formal charges were even filed. The FBI investigation, while ostensibly ongoing, seemed to narrow its focus almost exclusively on Jewell. This tunnel vision, combined with the media frenzy, created a perfect storm that threatened to engulf him entirely. The relentless pressure began to take its toll, transforming Jewell from a cooperative witness to a man trapped in a nightmare of his own making.
The turning point in the investigation, or rather, what appeared to be a turning point at the time, came with what the FBI considered a significant breakthrough. They focused on a phone call Jewell had allegedly made to 911 prior to the bombing, warning of the impending explosion. This call, along with what investigators perceived as inconsistencies in his initial statements and his perceived eagerness to be seen as a hero, solidified their suspicion. They believed they had their man. The media, already primed to believe Jewell's guilt, latched on to these supposed breakthroughs, further amplifying the narrative of his guilt. The public, bombarded with this information, largely accepted the narrative presented. The presumption of innocence, a cornerstone of the American justice system, seemed to evaporate in the face of the relentless media storm. The investigation, it seemed, had reached its inevitable conclusion.
On October 27, 1996, 88 days after the bombing, the siege on Richard Jewell's life intensified. FBI agents, armed with a search warrant, descended upon his apartment, seizing personal belongings, documents, and anything they deemed relevant to their investigation. While not formally arrested at this point, Jewell was subjected to intense scrutiny and effectively placed under house arrest. The media, ever present, documented every moment of this ordeal, broadcasting images of Jewell's home being searched, further solidifying his image as the prime suspect in the public consciousness. This highly publicized search, while legally sanctioned, served to further erode Jewell's public image and intensify the pressure he was under. The weight of the investigation, coupled with the unrelenting media attention, was crushing.
It's crucial to note that throughout this entire period, Richard Jewell maintained his innocence. He cooperated with investigators, submitted to questioning, and allowed his home to be searched. He endured the constant media scrutiny, the public condemnation, and the relentless pressure from law enforcement, all while steadfastly proclaiming his innocence. However, his pleas were largely drowned out by the cacophony of suspicion and speculation that surrounded him. Despite the lack of concrete evidence and the growing doubts about his involvement, the narrative of his guilt had taken hold. The presumption of innocence had been replaced by a presumption of guilt, fueled by a combination of investigative tunnel vision and media frenzy. The case against Richard Jewell, seemingly so strong in the public eye, was about to begin its unraveling.
In this final part of our deep dive into the Richard Jewell case, we're left with a chilling realization. Evil can often hide in plain sight, disguised as heroism. Jewell, initially lauded as a hero, quickly became a villain in the eyes of the media and the public. The rush to judgment, fueled by leaks and speculation, overshadowed the meticulous investigative work that eventually cleared his name. It's a stark reminder of the danger of unchecked narratives and the devastating impact they can have on innocent lives. The media frenzy surrounding Jewell, driven by the pressure to break the story first, created a modern-day witch hunt. They painted a portrait of a man desperate for fame, suggesting he planted the bomb to then discover it, becoming an instant hero. This narrative, once established, was incredibly difficult to dismantle, even in the face of contradictory evidence.
The case of Richard Jewell stands as a cautionary tale. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that the pursuit of justice isn't always straightforward. The FBI, under immense pressure to find the perpetrator, focused their attention on Jewell based on a flawed profile. While profiling can be a useful tool in criminal investigations, it should never be the sole basis for accusing someone. The lack of concrete evidence against Jewell, coupled with his unconventional behavior and eagerness to cooperate, created a perfect storm of suspicion. He fit the profile, and in the rush to solve the bombing, the investigators seemed to ignore the glaring lack of hard proof. The relentless media coverage further solidified this narrative in the public's consciousness, making it almost impossible for Jewell to receive a fair shake.
It's almost unfathomable to imagine the emotional toll this ordeal took on Richard Jewell. He went from being a celebrated hero to a prime suspect in a matter of days. His life was turned upside down, his reputation tarnished, and his privacy invaded. Even after he was officially cleared, the shadow of suspicion lingered. The damage was done. The real tragedy is that while the media and the public were fixated on Jewell, the actual bomber, Eric Rudolph, remained at large, free to commit more acts of terror. This case underscores the importance of responsible journalism and the need for a more cautious approach when dealing with sensitive investigations. The presumption of innocence, a cornerstone of our legal system, was effectively discarded in the pursuit of a sensational story.
The haunting question that remains is this: could another Richard Jewell scenario happen again? In our current media landscape, saturated with instant news and social media speculation, the potential for another rush to judgment is ever present. The 24-hour news cycle demands constant updates, often at the expense of accuracy and due process. The case of Richard Jewell serves as a stark reminder of the importance of critical thinking, the need to question narratives, and the devastating consequences of allowing speculation to masquerade as fact. It's a lesson we must never forget, and as we conclude this exploration into the complexities of the Richard Jewell case, we leave you with this chilling thought. How many other Richard Jewells are out there, silently enduring the weight of unfounded suspicion hidden in plain sight?
Thank you for walking with us through the shadows. The story doesn't end here. It lingers, echoing through time, reminding us that the darkest truths often hide in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant.
Stay safe and keep questioning everything.